My lawyer says any communication is grounds for arrest, my girlfriend declared. I discovered her fraud scheme. A week later, my lawyer called with shocked news. I thought I'd found the perfect family. Instead, I found the perfect nightmare. It's been 18 months since the police handcuffs bit into my wrists. 18 months since I watched my reputation, career, and life crumble in a single afternoon. The memories still wake me at night, heart pounding, sheets soaked with sweat. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Alex. I was 39 when I met Vanessa. A chance encounter at a neighborhood barbecue. She had laughing eyes and a warm smile that made the summer evening feel warmer. Her son Lucas stood half-hidden behind her leg, 7 years old with tousled hair and cautious eyes. Those eyes followed me everywhere that day, wary, calculating, sizing me up like only a child who's seen too many disappointments can. I never meant to fall in love with either of them, but life happens when you're busy making other plans. Our first date was coffee, simple, safe. Vanessa talked about her nursing job, her dreams of going back to school, her struggles as a single mother. Her ex was out of the picture, her words delivered with a shadow crossing her face. I listened, shared my own stories of a marketing career built from nothing. My cozy 3-bedroom house that felt too empty most nights. The promotion I'd just landed. One coffee turned into dinner the following week. Then weekend outings with Lucas. Slowly, cautiously, the boy started to show me glimpses of himself, his obsession with dinosaurs, his talent for math, his fear of thunderstorms. The first time he reached for my hand crossing the street, something shifted in my chest, something permanent. 6 months in, I was helping him with homework 3 nights a week, driving him to soccer practice, attending parent-teacher conferences when Vanessa picked up extra shifts. "You're good with him," she told me one night, her head on my chest, her voice soft in the darkness. "He never took to anyone like this before." My heart swelled with something dangerously close to pride. At 8 months, I suggested they move in with me. My house sat in a better school district. Lucas could have his own room instead of sharing Vanessa's cramped 1-bedroom apartment. "We couldn't impose," she protested, but her eyes told a different story. Hope mingled with calculation. I should have recognized that look, the first red flag waving frantically in the breeze. Instead, I pushed harder, talked about saving on rent, about building something together, about family, the word I'd been afraid to want for so long. By month 10, they were settling into my home. Lucas claimed the spare bedroom, covering the walls with dinosaur posters and solar system decals. Vanessa gradually filled my space with her scents, her colors, her presence. I was happier than I'd been in years, maybe ever. Those first few months living together were a masterclass in subtle manipulation. I can see that now. Back then, I only felt grateful when Vanessa took over managing the household bills. "You work so hard," she'd say. "Let me handle this part." I handed over passwords without hesitation. Grateful when she organized my messy home office, filing away statements and reorganizing my financial paperwork. "I like things tidy," she explained. Grateful when she suggested updating my emergency contacts, my insurance beneficiaries. "We're a family now," she'd remind me. The questions started innocently enough. Vanessa needed to use my laptop because hers was acting up. Could she just check her email? Of course she could. Could she borrow my credit card for school supplies? Lucas needed new shoes, a backpack, a tablet for homework. Of course. She'd help with bills next month when her paycheck cleared. The money from her ex was late again, just temporary. I understood, didn't I? I did, or thought I did. Sometimes my bank statements showed purchases I didn't recognize. Small things at first. A restaurant charge on a day I'd worked late. Online shopping from stores I never frequented. "Oh, I meant to tell you," she'd say when I asked. "I grabbed dinner with a coworker." Or, "Lucas needed new books for school." Always reasonable, always just plausible enough. The night I found her scrolling through my investment accounts, she didn't even look up. "Just curious about our future," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're a family now, right?" We were, or so I believed. Lucas and I had our own rituals by then. Sunday morning pancakes. Bedtime stories where he'd correct my dinosaur pronunciations. weekend bike rides where I taught him to navigate the neighborhood hills. "Are you gonna be my dad now?" he asked one night, his small voice serious in the dimness of his bedroom. My throat tightened. "Would that be okay with you, buddy?" He studied me with those old soul eyes. "I guess so, if you want. If I want, as if I could possibly want anything else." Looking back, I see how Vanessa isolated me so carefully I never noticed it happening. Friends who raised mild concerns about our whirlwind relationship were dismissed as jealous. My sister's questions about Vanessa's background were painted as elitist, judgmental. "Your family doesn't think I'm good enough for you," Vanessa would say, tears welling in her eyes. "They never gave me a chance." I became her defender, cut off friends who disrespected her, spoke less frequently to family members who judged her, all while she wove herself more tightly into every aspect of my life. The first time I noticed something truly wrong was when my credit card was declined at dinner. Embarrassed, I paid with another card, made a mental note to check my accounts. That night, I discovered several small transfers, $200 here, $350 there, going back months. Each one just small enough not to trigger immediate concern. Together, they added up to thousands. "We should combine our finances," Vanessa had suggested 3 months earlier. "It would be easier for household expenses." Her reasoning seemed sound at the time, practical, forward-thinking. So I'd added her as a joint account holder, given her a card with her name embossed in silver, shared my passwords for online banking in case of emergency. My hands trembled as I confronted her. "There must be some mistake," she insisted, her eyes wide with manufactured innocence. "I've only been using it for groceries and things for Lucas. Maybe you were hacked. I'll help you call the bank tomorrow." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. The bank confirmed the transfers had been authorized using the joint account. No fraud was possible since she was an authorized user. They showed me her signature on the paperwork, identical to mine in ways that now made my stomach turn. Vanessa suggested it must be bank errors, offered to help me file complaints, change passwords, secure my accounts. Like a fool, I let her. For weeks after that discovery, I watched more closely, noticed how Vanessa always collected the mail, how my financial statements no longer arrived at the house, how she always had a reason to need a little more money, a little more access. I started keeping a journal documenting discrepancies, making copies of statements when I could. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to believe the worst. Not about the woman I loved, not about the mother of the child who had become my son in all but name. I was still gathering evidence, still trying to convince myself I wasn't crazy when everything exploded. 2 weeks later, I received a call at work. A woman identifying herself as a CPS investigator. Could I come in for an interview regarding concerns about Lucas? My stomach dropped before I even knew why. The CPS office was sterile, all beige walls and motivational posters. The investigator had kind eyes that contrasted with her professionally neutral expression. "We've received a report of possible inappropriate behavior with Lucas," she said carefully. The world tilted sideways. "That's ridiculous," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "I would never," the investigator raised her hand slightly. "At this stage, we're just gathering information, Mr. Alexander. No decisions have been made." For 2 hours, she asked questions about my relationship with Lucas, my living arrangements, how discipline was handled in our home, whether I'd ever been alone with him. I answered everything honestly, still believing this was some terrible misunderstanding that would be cleared up quickly. I even signed a safety plan agreeing to supervised contact only until the investigation was complete. "We'll be speaking with Lucas at school tomorrow," she explained, "and we'll need to conduct a home visit within the week." I agreed to everything, cooperate fully, clear my name. My mistake was telling Vanessa about the investigation that night, thinking we'd handle it together. She was on the phone immediately, not to support me, but to contact a lawyer. By morning, everything had changed. The next day, my boss called me into his office. "We've received notice of a restraining order filed against you," he said, sliding a document across his desk. Administrative leave until this is sorted out, Alex, you understand. I didn't understand anything. The temporary restraining order claimed I posed an immediate danger to Lucas and Vanessa. It barred me from my own home, from contacting either of them, from coming within 500 feet of their schools or workplaces, based on credible allegations of child abuse. My hands shook as I read Vanessa's statement, the careful mixture of truth and lies, the dates and details specific enough to sound convincing. The claims that I'd threatened both of them to maintain silence. I was being systematically erased from my own life. That night in a cheap extended-stay hotel, couldn't go home, conditions of the order, I called my sister in a panic. I need a lawyer, I told her. A good one. Later, against my new lawyer's explicit advice, I tried calling Vanessa. I don't know what's happening, I said, my voice breaking. Lucas knows I would never hurt him, never. Her voice came cold through the speaker. You're violating the restraining order. My lawyer says any communication is grounds for arrest. Restraining order? Vanessa, please. The line went dead. I spent the next 2 days in a fog. The lawyer my sister found specialized in false allegations cases. He wasn't cheap, but he'd seen this before. Unfortunately, the system is designed to protect potential victims first and ask questions later, he explained. Which is generally good, except when someone weaponizes it. He looked at the financial records I'd managed to gather, whistled low through his teeth. This is methodical, he said. Let's request an emergency hearing for your accounts at least. But the courts moved slowly. In the meantime, I was barred from my home, suspended from my job, and hemorrhaging money for legal fees and that dismal hotel room. 3 days later, I checked my accounts and felt the floor drop from beneath me. My savings had been steadily diminishing for weeks, larger withdrawals now, no longer bothering with subtlety. My investment accounts showed transfer requests pending. Credit cards maxed out with cash advances. When I called the bank in a panic, they explained that as a joint account holder, Vanessa had every legal right to those funds. The credit card companies said the same. Her name was on everything now. My mortgage statements showed paperwork filed for refinancing. My signature, perfectly forged but legally binding until proven otherwise. In the midst of fighting for my reputation, for access to a child I'd come to love, I was now also fighting for financial survival. Friends stopped returning calls. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid me. The word abuser doesn't need proof to stick. My sister was the only one who still believed in me, and even she had moments of uncomfortable silence when I proclaimed my innocence. 3 weeks into this nightmare, my lawyer called, his voice tense with carefully controlled excitement. We have a court date to contest the restraining order, he said. And the CPS investigation is taking an interesting turn. Lucas's statements aren't consistent. They've scheduled additional interviews. A week later, he called again. Lucas recanted, he said, completely broke down during the follow-up interview, says his mom made him lie. My knees gave out. I sank to the floor of my sister's guest room, phone pressed to my ear. Why? I managed to ask. Why would he say those things? The full story emerged over the following days. Lucas hadn't wanted to lie, had fought against it. But Vanessa had coached him, threatened him, manipulated him with the skill of a seasoned predator. The truth was worse than I imagined. The abuse allegations weren't just about money. They were a smokescreen. Vanessa had been systematically stripping my finances while setting up the perfect distraction. She knew exactly how the system worked. Knew I'd be removed from my home by the restraining order. Knew I'd be too busy fighting for my reputation to notice the thousands disappearing from my accounts every week. She'd done it before, 3 times with 3 other men. Different cities, different names sometimes. Same playbook: gain access to finances, manufacture allegations, drain accounts during the chaos, disappear. The final, sickening twist came when Lucas revealed the reason for his breakdown. There was abuse happening, not by me, but by Vanessa's cousin who sometimes watched him. The same cousin who helped her move from city to city, identity to identity. Lucas had tried to tell her. She'd ignored him, too focused on her con to protect her own child. That's what finally broke him. Not the pressure of the investigation, but the weight of an even darker truth he'd been carrying. The boy's tearful confession unleashed a tornado of investigations. Financial fraud, identity theft, child endangerment, previous warrants from 2 states. Police finally caught up with Vanessa at the airport. One-way ticket to Costa Rica. New identity papers in her carry-on. Lucas's passport conspicuously absent. She'd been planning to leave him behind once she'd drained the last of my accounts. Lucas went into emergency foster care, then to his maternal grandmother in Arizona. A woman who hadn't known her daughter's whereabouts for years, who cried when she met Lucas for the first time. The charges against me were dropped, the restraining order dissolved. Police reports amended to show I was the victim, not the perpetrator. The nightmare was over, except it wasn't. My reputation was in tatters. My job offered a pittance in back pay along with carefully worded regrets. Neighbors still whispered. My savings were gone. The emotional toll had left me a hollow shell of myself. Even with Vanessa's arrest, untangling the financial damage took months. Credit scores don't rebound overnight. Refinanced mortgages can't be easily unwound. Joint accounts once opened leave paper trails that haunt your financial history for years. I moved in with my sister temporarily. Sold the house I could no longer afford, the house where Lucas's height measurements still marked the kitchen doorframe. The house where, for a brief time, I'd believed I was building a family. My lawyer suggested suing my employer for wrongful termination. They jumped the gun, he argued. Presumed guilt without due process. The settlement barely covered his fees and a fraction of my depleted savings, but it was enough to start over. New city, new state, new business of my own where I wouldn't have to explain the 6-month gap in my employment history. That was 18 months ago. I still flinch when my phone rings with an unknown number. Still have nightmares about restraining orders and false allegations. Still wake up reaching for a little boy who isn't there. Sometimes I wonder about Lucas, whether he's healing, whether he remembers our Sunday pancakes or bike rides, whether he believes I hated him for telling the truth. I wonder if he knows how brave he was, how his courage saved not just me, but probably others after me. Vanessa is serving 4 years for fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. Not nearly enough for the lives she's ruined, but something. Her cousin got 12 years for his crimes against Lucas and other children they found evidence of on his computer. The therapist says I need to focus on rebuilding. Some days I manage that better than others. I've learned things about people, about systems designed to protect that sometimes destroy instead, about how quickly a life can unravel, about how isolation makes you vulnerable in ways you don't recognize until it's too late. I've learned that concern isn't the same as control, that love isn't always possessive, that family isn't necessarily blood. Most of all, I've learned about resilience, about reconstructing a self from scattered fragments. My new business is growing. My new apartment has no memories haunting its corners. I've made a few careful friendships, though dating seems impossible still. Who would want my baggage, my scars? I've learned to fact-check everything, to verify claims, to trust my instincts when something feels wrong. The hypervigilance is exhausting but necessary, a survival mechanism I never wanted but can't afford to lose. The court-mandated therapy helps. So does the support group for victims of similar scams. Turns out there are a lot of us. Men and women both, targeted by predators who use the system's protective instincts as weapons. Together, we're lobbying for changes. Better safeguards for joint accounts. More protections against false allegations without compromising safety for genuine victims. It's slow, frustrating work, but it gives meaning to the wreckage. Yesterday, I received a letter forwarded through my lawyer, a child's careful handwriting on lined paper. Dear Alex, Grandma said I could write to you. I'm sorry for everything. I miss our bike rides. I got an A in math. I hope you're not mad at me anymore. My vision blurred as I read those words over and over. I sat down immediately to write back, to tell him I was never mad, that none of it was his fault, that he was the bravest person I knew, that I missed him too, every single day. I don't know if my letter will reach him. Don't know if his grandmother will allow further communication. Don't know if reopening this door is wise for either of us. But for the first time in 18 months, I feel something like hope flickering in my chest. Not hopping for a reunion that chapter is closed, the ending rewritten by forces beyond my control, but hope for healing, for both of us. Hope that someday, when Lucas is older, he'll understand that family isn't always about blood or legal documents. That sometimes it's about Sunday pancakes and dinosaur names and teaching someone to ride a bike. Hope that he'll remember not just the nightmare's end, but the dream that came before it. As for me, I'm learning to trust again, slowly, cautiously, with boundaries firmly in place. I'm learning that one person's betrayal doesn't define all people. That vulnerability isn't weakness, even when it leads to pain. That resilience isn't about never breaking, but about how you piece yourself back together. Some nights I still wake up in darkness, heart racing, the phantom weight of accusations pressing on my chest. But now, sometimes, I also wake with the memory of a small hand in mine, a child's laughter, the weight of trust so freely given. And in those moments, despite everything, I find myself grateful for having known what it means to be someone's family, even if only for a little while, even if it ended in flames. Because for a few bright months before the darkness fell, I was exactly where I was meant to be. The rest, the betrayal, the accusations, the financial ruin, that's just the price I paid for the lesson. The lesson that love, real love, is always worth the risk, even when it breaks you, maybe especially then.